And a Fox News alert. Former Vice President Joe Biden has officially entered the 2020 race 2 hours and 22 minutes ago. Biden is now the 20th candidate to throw their hat in the ring.
But as the party continues its push left, can Joe Biden come out on top?
Well, California Republican congressional candidate Omar Navarro joins us now to react. Good morning, Omar.
Good morning.
What's your immediate reaction to the idea, as we heard from Dan Bongino earlier, the idea that Joe Biden is sort of putting what Dan called identity politics front and center?
Well, I mean, that's what the typical playbook of the Democrats. They use identity politics to divide people. They divide my community by using identity politics. You know, I was Latino growing up. My parents were from Mexico and Cuba, and I've noticed this growing up. I used to see Democrats all over Los Angeles using identity politics at their best.
What do you think is going to happen with the Democratic Party? Because you've got so many that are so progressive, and Bernie Sanders is doing really well right now, according to the polls. But then you have those that are more central, and those are the ones that will probably likely vote for Joe Biden.
You know, one thing I've seen from the Democratic Party, that they've been pushing a lot of people away from the Democratic Party. Of course, you see a lot of inciting violence going on all over Los Angeles and California. A lot of people are conservative, can't even go out there. When you see Democrats are going after Republicans and physically, not emotionally. And I think that's the problem that's going on right now. We have someone who's running for president who's had 8 years as vice president, and I believe that ultimately is going to come down to the successes of Donald Trump. He's created 4 million jobs. He's had over 400,000 jobs in manufacturing. He's done a lot of good things. I think that this is the president we're going to keep in this next election.
Well, of course, you would like to replace Maxine Waters in that district there in Los Angeles. You're the Republican. She's the Democrat. I don't know if you've heard, but she thinks the president should be indicted. Watch this. And impeached.
There are many people around this president who have interacted with those from Russia, from the Kremlin, and with Putin. Where are they coming from? And I think when you ask yourself this question, you'd better be concerned about whether or not these are real patriots or whether or not they're in the pockets of the president of the United States.
Okay, so she's been pushing the impeachment. I know you tweeted yesterday, on Waters yesterday, we must impeach you from Congress for encouraging threats toward Americans and our president. But I know since you are part of a protected class in our country, nothing will happen. The people can stand with me. They can empower me to stop you. They will. And then you've got a link right there to donate to your campaign. What's been the reaction to that tweet by your campaign?
Yeah. You know, as I researched it more, I looked at the Constitution, and I look at Article 1, and I look at Section 5 in the Constitution and Clause 2, and I look at that you can actually expel a member of Congress for disorderly behavior. And for me, that's something that's viable, that you can do that. All you need is 2/3 majority of the vote from Congress. Ultimately, people can still support my campaign. They can go and donate at omarnavarro.com. But ultimately, that's what it takes. You have to go out and you have to do something about it, and that's what I've been doing from day one.
Well, in your district, how many people would like to see the President of the United States impeached because she represents the people of your district?
You know, when I walk around in my district and I talk to voters, and I knock to different voters, you know, I talk to the Hispanic community, which is the largest community, it's 54% of my district. You know, you have to look at it that way. You have to look at what are the demographics. And when I look at the demographics and I talk to those voters when I'm knocking doors, the people want to see someone that's going to unite them. They're seeing Maxine Waters as dividing them, and they're tired of it. You know, they've already had her for over 30 years. You know, she's been in public service for 40 years. And I think it's time for a change, and it's time for someone that's going to bring back jobs, bring back stability, common sense into our district, and I feel that I can do that.
All right, Omar, we wish you all the best. Thank you so much for coming on with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The border town of Yuma, Arizona, becoming the first in the country to declare a state of emergency, saying that they are overwhelmed by the flood of families seeking asylum. Joining me right now to react to all of that is the Michigan Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee. He is Chief Deputy Whip and a member of the House Ways and Means and Budget Committees. And Congressman, it's always a pleasure to see you. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thanks, Maria.
So you just heard what Senator Lindsey Graham said. Can you get behind legislation, should it hit the House, in terms of changing some of these immigration laws? Because It feels to me like there is a crisis at the border. We showed this exclusive video that we'll show you right now. This was last week on the 16th, where Border Patrol apprehended 980 people who got out of a van and just crossed the border illegally in 3 different groups. You know that if they say that they're family and they're with children, the U.S. can only detain them for 20 days, and then they just send them back out to the population. And yet, Congressman, it seems like we can't get the attention of some of your colleagues in leadership positions. For example, Ted Lieu. Ted Lieu, your colleague, has been tweeting about this in such an arrogant and rude way. Here's what he says every day. He says this: "Today is day 30 of our national emergency. Can you feel the emergency?" Apparently, the self-declared major national emergency is not on the top of mind for real Donald Trump today. Every day he's saying we're in day 30, we're in day 29, you know, making fun of it. How are you going to get their attention, and do you even want to?
Well, obviously, this is an issue we have to deal with, but let's be clear. There's a crisis in Honduras. There's a crisis in Guatemala. There's a crisis in El Salvador. And while there are people presenting themselves at the border, we have to be careful to say that it is legal for a person to present in the United States and seek asylum. I don't disagree, however, that we have to do something to make better decisions about how we handle these sorts of problems. We could codify, for example, the program that was in place just a few years ago that kept families together when their asylum cases were being determined. And clearly we need more resources to make sure that those asylum cases are heard more quickly. But yeah, I don't think it helps to deny that there's a problem, but I think it's really important that we not view it in a one-dimensional fashion, that it's only a problem because we're dealing with people crossing the border seeking asylum. It is a problem because our entire immigration system, including aspects of the asylum system, is broken. And if we're going to deal with this, it's my hope that we deal with it in a comprehensive fashion.
So just to be clear, you said there's a crisis in El Salvador, a crisis in Honduras, crisis in Guatemala. Is there a crisis in America?
Well, the crisis is coming to us, and we have a responsibility to be really thoughtful about how we deal with that. Well, it's a crisis that is appearing at the border, but I don't mean to split hairs on this, but I do want to be really clear that the crisis is a crisis that these families are facing. As you said in the initial reporting on this,
a lot of people say that when further looked at, when looked closer, they're actually not families. There's a whole game going on where people are borrowing other people's kids so that they could cross the border with kids. So they're actually not family. They look like families. But a lot of them, but there's no evidence that the majority of them are not genuine families seeking asylum. In fact, I think the Border Patrol said that last July, when looked closer, that many of them are not families. That's what the Border Patrol said. I mean, well, it could be that many of them are not. Yeah. But when you're talking about people fleeing a difficult and dangerous situation, I think you have to accept the fact that because some of them may not have pure intention, that we just can't ignore those that do. I mean, I saw those children back in July when I visited one of those facilities that were holding the children that had been separated from their parents. It's a real problem, but I think sometimes we end up painting these issues as if it is completely black and white, all one or all the other. Yeah, no, I think we have a real problem that we have to address. What is black and white, though, is you are representing your constituents in Michigan, and the American people are also getting impacted from these crises that you're referring to in Honduras and Guatemala, and they're getting impacted by all of these illegals coming into the country, taking their jobs, weighing down wages, et cetera. Expensive to give benefits to people who are living here and not paying taxes, all of that. So my point is why can't the Democrats, your colleagues, see that there's an issue and work together with the Republicans to actually change it, rather than being in investigate mode all the time? Do you think the American people and your constituents, in particular in Michigan, want you to get something done on their behalf?
Sure they do, and I will say this, we're not in investigate mode all the time. The vast majority of the time I spend in Congress has very little to do with any investigations of anyone in the administration, and that's true of people on both sides of the aisle. It gets a lot more attention, certainly from the news media. But the fact of the matter is, we spent a lot of time on these issues. And,
so what could you,
for example, I know you had...
What do you think was done in the first 100 days with the Democrats in the majority? What is a real piece of legislation that is done that you can say, okay, this is what we got done in the first 100 days? Because we just saw the first 100 days last week.
Yeah, we passed the Paycheck Fairness Act that I think significantly improved access to resources that allow people, women particularly, to have access to decent pay for the work that they do. We passed the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act. We passed H.R. 1 that I think goes a substantial distance in correcting some of the real problems that we see in our political system. We have
you would like to
an
get
agenda.
Infrastructure done, right? You would like to get something done on infrastructure.
Absolutely.
There's obviously issues in Flint, Michigan, that you have been quite concerned with.
No question about it. In fact, we've had really good discussions on the Ways and Means Committee, which will have a part of the infrastructure conversation because we have to figure out how we're going to pay for it. And those have been bipartisan conversations. So I think very often there is this impression that we can't do more than one thing at a time. We have a responsibility to provide oversight on the administration, and we're doing that. But that doesn't mean we should do that at the expense of the other big questions. I know the people I work for, they want us to take care of our responsibilities under the Constitution to hold the administration accountable. But they really want us to get to work trying to solve the big problems that affect their families every single day.
Absolutely. And we'll be watching you do just that. Counselor, it's good to see you this morning. Thanks so much.